I've been a big fan of extraction shooters for the last few years. I never really got into Tarkov, but I loved DMZ. I sunk dozens of hours into Delta Force and Grey Zone Warfare, and recently did a video about how much fun I was having with Exoborne in its new playtest. The concept's been exciting ever since I first saw it way back in the Division. Putting yourself into a dangerous PvPvE scenario where you go into the dark zone, and the longer you spend trying to get good gear, the more chance you have of losing it all. If you turn on other players and manage to take them out, you get everything they've collected too. The risk-reward mechanic is strong, and there's a natural narrative that builds up in every single round that makes it great for content creation. But while I was playing Exoborne this morning, I felt the same little switch click in my brain that always has with extraction shooters. It suddenly stopped being fun. It happened with DMZ sometime around Season 5. I was thinking about what I hoped for in a new year of content, although I was pretty sure that we weren't going to get one, and I realised that I couldn't think of anything that they could do that would make the game fun for me again. More missions, more maps, more loot, it didn't really matter, because the core of the game had got stale. We'd ploughed through the missions, perhaps too fast, and then all that was left to do was fight other players. And there wasn't even anything we were hoping to get from beating the other players, because the loadout system made it so easy to just always have whatever weapons you wanted. I felt like there was nothing interesting to do in DMZ, especially when the missions they did add were mostly incredibly boring. Outside of maybe some of the ones in Koshai Complex and Building 21, which I think were highlights for the mode. But when it came to just doing PvP over and over and over again, it got really samey. For Grey Zone Warfare it happened when I reached the 3rd or 4th area in the game, and I realised that the mission types were all just repeating. There weren't the interesting narratives and mysteries like there were in the starter town. Instead it was always just go kill 15 of these enemies, go get 5 of those items, go to these 3 locations, kill this boss, over and over again. It felt like the game was just wasting my time, hoping that I'd accidentally stumble into some fun along the way. For Delta Force, it really quickly became the same. I was just moving from location to location, opening random boxes like I was playing some gacha game, hoping that there was some valuable loot inside that I could get out with, or maybe something that I needed for a mission. Once I saw YouTube videos that were, giving guides on Delta Force, and they were showing the ideal routes to get the best chances of loot, and creators recommended that you dropped into a game, ran a loop of opening boxes, then extracted over and over again. It felt like I'd kind of seen the code behind the Matrix. I couldn't be immersed in the game or enjoy it anymore, because it had devolved into pulling a lever on a one-armed bandit, hoping I'd hit the jackpot and then win more gear or buy more gear with the money I'd earned, so I could then go and do more searching and just keep doing the same thing again. There wasn't an end goal, there wasn't a finish line to be heading towards. It was just, oh, if you do really well in this, you can keep on doing this and it will get a little bit easier. It's almost like the opposite of a difficulty curve in a normal video game where, it slowly gets hard as it builds up towards a climax. With these games, it was starting off really difficult and then sort of getting easier as it built towards absolutely nothing at all. In Exoborne, at first, I'd hoped it was something different. I even did a video about how it was the best extraction shooter since DMZ. It had some crazy movement, dramatic moments with the storms and the tornadoes. It felt like it had a bit more of a focus on the PvE shooting and exploring these laboratories and strange devices and the different factions within the game world. But then after just 12 hours with the game, which I played in the playtest, I felt like I'd worked it out. I know each game I'll go in, I'll find an artifact, which is just another gacha mechanic to have a hope of getting better gear. I'll maybe search for some items for a mission, and then I'll leave. And that's kind of all I'll ever do in the game. Well, that is, except for PvP. And the inherent problems in all of these extraction shooters that I've been talking about seem to be answered by PvP. And this is something I said for ages about DMZ, that I know lots of people said, oh, we want a version of it without PvP where we can just do the missions. And I always said, well, that'll be super boring. Like, why would you want that? The PvP is the thing that adds the tension. It's the thing that adds the kind of stories while you're playing. Like, yes, the core gameplay loop of these games is quite boring and repetitive, but there's always the risk of another player finding you and fighting you for your gear, or the thrill of the hunt as you chase down players to try and get like a cheap or fast upgrade or regain, if you can beat them in a fight. At first, this is fun because the games are new and everyone's still working it out. There's a lot of fun seeing how like different mechanics work, from the slow and steady tactical combat in a game like Zone Warfare to the arcade madness that we've seen in Exoborne. But then the same problem always starts to show itself. Because extraction games are built around progression, about you getting better gear and better weapons and getting more powerful, they don't just encourage you to spend as much time as possible in the game, they reward you for it by making you more powerful. Players who play the games a lot don't just get better at them, and they do, obviously their skills improve, but they get stronger too with better weapons, armor, tools. It doubles down on a skill gap by making it easy for the best players to have every advantage in a fight, while the worst players will constantly be starting from scratch. I'm going to go back to my analogy of Mario Kart because I think it's one of the best pieces of game design ever for multiplayer games. In Mario Kart, when you're at the front, you get a load of items that are generally quite useless to you. If you're at the back, you get loads of items that help you to speed up, that help you to take out people in front of you, and just kind of bring the pack closer together. Things like blue shells are designed so somebody who's not very good at the game has a chance against somebody who is really good, and it keeps the games exciting. In this sort of extraction shooter, the opposite happens. It's like if you were playing Mario Kart and the people at the front constantly got mushroom boosts and some sort of reverse blue shell that would take out the person that was last, and the person that was last got slowed down a little bit to keep them further away. That wouldn't be fun for anybody, and that's kind of what happens in extraction shooters. And this stops new players from playing. If you hop into an extraction game more than a few weeks after launch, there's going to be a hardcore group who will have played nothing else since the game came out, and they'll not only be more skilled than you because they've put loads of practice into it, but they'll also have all of the best loot. You'll be the prey for their hunts because they've already finished the PvE content, and since you're new, you're not going to stand a chance. So most people will do the reasonable thing and just quit, because who wants to play a game where you're just constantly losing one-sided battles? That's insane. And that decimates the player base, which means there's never any hope for like skill-based matchmaking or gear-based matchmaking to separate these kinds of players. The only option is to put the first sort of set of players, the players who are new, against bots, and then keep all the players who are like really hardcore against each other. And then you've got the problem that you're going to have quite a boring version of the game where you're just fighting bots, and then an incredibly hard version of the game. Kind of more on that later. And I really think this is what kills extraction shooters. Of course, we don't know how many players the most popular example, Escape from Tarkov, really has, because they don't release those figures, it's not on Steam. But other extraction games seem to follow a trend. Like, they're often quite successful at launch, and then the population decays as it becomes harder and harder for new players to get into. There's been a couple, like Delta Force and Hunt Showdown, that have sort of held on to an audience, but it does seem to have been dropping as it goes on. I mean, Hunt Showdown every now and then sort of seems to reinvent itself a bit and grab a few more people. But other ones, like Zone Warfare or The Cycle, both of which were really fun games, just plummeted rapidly after release. You end up with games with a hyper-dedicated core audience that will absolutely eviscerate any new players, and just make sure they never come back. And because those audiences are so dedicated, they often can't quite see what's happening in the games that they love. I still get people telling me that DMZ is thriving and saying it's one of the most popular Call of Duty modes. You know, Infinity Ward would be crazy not to come back to it. When I hopped on, for the first time in maybe 6 months to record footage for this video, it was exactly the same as it was a few months ago when I played it. There were groups of players who immediately set off to try and kill the other teams as they spawn in, and then they just resorted to camping certain areas to try and kill as many players as possible. They were doing it to get loot they don't even want. Can you imagine a new player coming into a game like that? When we were playing DMZ, when it first started, when we were learning it, Players were mostly minding their own business and sometimes passing each other by, sometimes getting into fights, but they were all doing their own missions. So when you're in a lobby, you were kind of in a world with a load of preoccupied players, and that was interesting, that was kind of fun. But now, you're going into a game where basically everyone else, the only thing they want to do is hunt down players. It's like you've got a set of incredibly hard enemies spawning in the game while you're trying to do the very first missions. Like, that just seems crazy. I don't think the problem really lies with the games themselves exactly being bad in any way. DMZ, Delta Force, Zone Warfare, Exoborne, the games I've been talking about in this video, are all good games. While I don't agree with every choice the designers made, they do a lot right, and when the natural progression of the entire genre is to tend towards serving a tiny dedicated hardcore group at the expense of new players, or people who can't play as much, it doesn't matter that the games are designed well. It's a recipe for disaster. You're always going to end up in a state where the only people playing are the people who absolutely love the game, and you're never going to be able to attract a new audience because the game just isn't fun for those people. Or for people like me who maybe like to play lots of different games and don't want to commit loads of time to just one. Exoborne felt like it was speedrunning towards this state. The fact that I kind of got sick of it within 12 hours in a playtest is a bit of a worrying sign. At the very end of the playtest, we had a choice. I was playing with Flynn, and basically we could either go into the first map where most of the enemy players were really just bots, and not very clever bots. They'd just sort of stand there and shoot at you while you destroyed them, and there was nothing really to do in there. You know, you could go get some artifacts to give you more of the same loot you've already got a million of. Or we could head into the second map, you know, where you had to be a certain level, you had to have a certain amount of gear on you, and if we went in there, organised, highly skilled teams were hunting for players because, you know, there was no point getting artifacts or anything like that. They just wanted to go and kill other players, and they would absolutely demolish us in seconds. It just wasn't fun. I haven't even talked about cheaters or anything like that in this because, to be honest, I have no idea how much cheating goes on in any of these games. I've heard it's a problem in Delta Force. Obviously, it was at various times a bit of a problem in DMZ. I'm not sure if it really is anymore. I don't know how that works nowadays. I've got no idea if anyone was cheating on Exoborne. You know, Exoborne in a playtest, despite being kind of super easy to get a key for it, at its peak only had 4,000 players. So I would be surprised if many people were making cheats for that. But people have been saying for years now that extraction shooters are the next big thing, like battle royales were. I just don't see that happening. So far, none of them have even got close to becoming as popular as the big battle royales like Fortnite or Warzone or Apex. Most end up closing or losing their player base within a few weeks of releasing. I know there's rumours about a return for DMZ in the next few years, but while I'd love to see Call of Duty take another shot at it kind of selfishly, I think I'd be really interested in it, I feel like it'd be a terrible decision financially. I just can't see it ever working, because sure, they'll have the people who really enjoyed DMZ and are still playing it, which I think is quite a small number of people, but are there going to be that many new people who maybe weren't interested in DMZ the first time round, but are like, oh, we'll give it a shot this time? Maybe if they do something new, something like more focused on PvE, maybe like more of a co-op experience, maybe that'd be interesting, but then, you know, they've already tried it with the Spec Ops missions and the raids, and I don't think anyone really cared about them. So yeah, I'm not really sure what they can do. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know if there's any extraction games that maybe I haven't mentioned in this video, but you think do something a bit differently, they do something in an interesting way that I should take a look at. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.